Hi everyone, in this week's video we are picking up on preventing illegal working and the Home Office's guidance on right to work checks, which now runs to a very brief 77 pages if you want to hit print on that guide. So from 8th February 2024 the new guide applies. There are just a few fairly minor changes but significant if they do apply to you. The first is that the civil penalty for non-compliance has been raised to £45,000 per illegal worker for a first breach, £60,000 for any subsequent breach. There was a concession in relation to the EU settlement scheme. That was if we employed somebody and it became clear that they did not have the right to work in the UK because they failed to apply as an EU citizen to the settlement scheme in time. That concession is now ended, so it essentially means that if we identify an EU national who does not have the right to work, we must report that in the same way essentially to the Home Office and take steps to terminate employment. The final change to the guidance is that where certain workers, particularly those who have a skilled worker visa under Tier 2, the old Tier 2, can take up supplementary employment. So often they will be allowed to take up to a further 20 hours of supplementary employment. The guidance states that employers should secure additional evidence. In order to take up that 20 hours, the individual must be taking up a job either on the shortage occupation list, that's a limited list of other occupations, or a job in the same profession and at the same level as what they're currently doing on a full-time basis. And they must continue to work for their sponsor in the same way. So essentially this is somebody who has a skilled worker visa already. They're then entitled to take up to 20 hours of supplementary employment. The revised guidance that's been published states that where we are the employer providing that supplementary employment, we have to carry out a right to work check as we ordinarily would. And we have to take steps to ensure that the requirements are met so that the individual is still working for their sponsor. We have to be satisfied of the job description in the occupation code and their normal working hours. Crucially, and we'll come on to this with students in a moment, we have to ask the employee whether they are doing any other supplementary employment to ensure that we aren't breaching that maximum cap of 20 hours of supplementary employment. And that brings me on to a question which we had from another client last week in relation to a student. So they tend to be granted permission to work in the UK, and as part of that permission, they are generally entitled to work up to either 10 or 20 hours during term time and full-time outside of those term time hours. So they're permitted to work full-time before the course starts, during holidays, and during the period that they hold permission to remain after they've completed their course. The query we had is what evidence does the employee have to provide of term dates and of that of them meeting that requirement to limit 20 hours during term time. So the guidance states that students should confirm with their sponsor the term end date and verify this with the employer. The employer really should go further than that though. So the guidance states that the employer should obtain, copy and retain details of the academic term and vacation times covering the duration of study, provided by the sponsoring education provider directly or indirectly if the student is providing a letter or email. So it's for the employer to determine if the information is sufficient. The query in the case we had was that the employee had openly admitted working additional hours elsewhere, so was in breach of that 20 hours term time requirement. The employer will sometimes suggest that their course has ended so that they can then work full time. But the guidance is quite clear in stating that we have to be able to defend our position, and to me that means providing irrefutable evidence from the education provider of those term dates, because we don't want to be in breach of the requirement to limit work to 20 hours during term time or full time outside of that period. So yeah, 77 pages of wonderful guidance. It is fairly complex. If you do need any further advice on this, or indeed any other employment or immigration matter, please do get in touch. Visit the website chadwicklawrence.co.uk or email employmenthub@chadlaw.co.uk. Thank you.